Okay, hi everyone. I think we'll give it a few more minutes as more people are joining. I can see the numbers going up. Okay, perhaps we can wait for another minute if that's okay. Okay, I can see that more people are joining, so let's give it a few more minutes. Okay, so I think it's almost 1:03, so I suggest that we start. Thank you all so much for joining us for the second webinar in the UCL IEDE Integrated Building Design webinar series. My name is Anna Mavrogianni. I'm based at UCL IEDE, and I will be chairing this event. And it's really our honor to welcome back, should we say, Ankita Dwivedi, founder of Firstplanit, and also an MSc Health, Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings alumna. So thanks so much for agreeing to give this talk, Ankita. Sorry, my screen is not moving. There we are. So yeah, just a few words about our institute. So our teaching and research addresses some of the greatest challenges and issues facing our daily environment. And we are interested in making our buildings, towns and cities better places in which to live, with a specific focus on human well-being, health, productivity, energy use, sustainability more broadly, and also climate change. So if you would like to keep up to date with our events or research and teaching activities, please follow us on Twitter. This is our Twitter handle. This is some of our MSc and undergraduate programs. So we have the Environmental Design and Engineering ED, one of the most established programs, as well as the Light and Lighting, but also the more recently launched Health, Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings, which Ankita did, and Smart Buildings and Digital Engineering, as well as our 2 undergraduate programs. So yeah, you can find more information about those programs on our website, and again, following us on Twitter. And just to mention that the recordings for all the previous webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and look for UCL IEDE, you can find the full list of the integrated building design webinars, and the same will apply for Ankita's talk as well. Hopefully in the next few days, if you had registered and didn't manage to attend or can't attend fully today, the talk will be made available online. So thank you again so much for joining us. So just a few words to introduce Ankita. So Ankita has a really impressive CV. She led architecture and design teams for top Fortune 100 firm projects across the globe for 20 years. 5 years ago, she decided to leave business as usual behind. And while continuing her research at Scala Colab, she joined the Health, Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings MSc program with us. And after that, and after being selected for the UCL Launch program for startups in 2019, she started Firstplanit, about which she's going to talk today, as a digital tech company. And throughout her career, Ankita has continuously researched, interrogated, and innovated to understand the built environment's impact on the environment, businesses, communities, and individuals. So without further ado, Ankita, over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Anna, and really excited to be back and sharing.
It's really nice to have you.
What we've been building for the past 3 years, and actually since I left and finished my MSc course at UCL. I will share my screen with you and run through a few slides that I've prepared for this, but essentially it's going to be a very relaxed, casual session. And I'll share with you our journey, starting with, why did we even think of Firstplanit, and why did we even think of, building it to start with? And then how did we go about it? Because there was a lot of research and R&D behind the digital tool that we've now eventually built. And then at the third part of the session, I'll share some aspects and features of the tool. But what I'd love to do is also offer anybody who's participating in this session to join us in a few open sort of free sessions on how to use the tool more extensively to build a project later. So we're not going to go into the tool in great detail, but it's the story really that builds up on how we went about it, and hopefully you find it interesting. But yeah, we'd love your feedback, and please send your questions through. But yes, to start with, Anna, thanks a lot for this opportunity. And of course, UCL's course is instrumental in supporting us and actually, in a way, igniting the spark that then eventually became Firstplanit. So it's very, very closely tied with the goals of the master's program. So let me share my screen.
Just to say that people can post their questions in the Q&A. If that's okay during your talk, and then we can take questions at the end.
So can you see my screen?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. So Firstplanit is a digital tool, as Anna mentioned, and the digital tool goal essentially is to make building material and product choices really easy for people, and especially people who are interested in making a positive impact. And you might have heard that at the moment, embodied impacts of products is becoming a big buzzword in a way. So people are talking about it, people are trying to understand it better, people are trying to improve what we're doing with materials, what types of products we're choosing, and why are we choosing that. But our mission is very, very clear at Firstplanit, and so it's a very mission-driven startup. We kind of didn't go into Firstplanit thinking that, we really want, I want to be an entrepreneur and let's actually build a startup. It was more like, well, how do we accelerate health, well-being, and sustainability in the building sector? And what are the mechanisms and processes through which we can do that? And we realized that actually a digital tool is the best way to communicate and channel some of the learnings and some of the research that we already have at hand, but making it very easy for people to use it and utilize it. So making all the knowledge really useful for people who might not have access to it, or who might not be technically trained to understand the knowledge, even if they have access to it. And of course, we worked very hard for more than 3 years. With what I'm going to share with you today. And we've had some great successes and recognitions along the way. So we're very, very honored and delighted about that, as little milestones that help us continue on this path. So our team is made up of researchers, architects, techies, and people in our industry, really. And some of us have a lot of experience, not just in terms of sustainability and research, but also how teams work in the market, how businesses work, and how time poor teams are really. But some of us have deep domain expertise in our research as well, and we're continuously learning and analyzing and reading, because this is not a space that, the knowledge is complete or packed. It's an evolving space, and new things and new pieces of information are coming up all the time. So we're learning a lot as we go through. So the question is, why did we work so hard, and why are we continuing to work so hard to build Firstplanit? And this is the big why behind what we're doing. So effectively, we know that buildings deplete, pollute, and harm. So it's not just CO2 emissions, it's also waste, it's respiratory illnesses, and there's a lot of money being spent on construction. It's one of the biggest industries on the planet. And if we look through, regulations and certifications are now getting tighter and tighter. So it's not just people wanting to be green from grassroots level, but it's also organizations and businesses really tightening up. And there's a lot of mandate around ESG, around net zero carbons. People are being punished for not doing that. And if you look and map the different targets, you'll see that they sit across many different scales. And it's not just, again, CO2, it's health, it's society, it's costs, it's environment as a whole, which includes pollution and toxicity. But if you look at the ultimate impact of anything that's to do with buildings, the physical embodiment of any building is the material or product that is used to build that. So anything else we do is theoretical. The moment it becomes real is when we buy real stuff and put it together and organize it in a space or an environment. So the embodied impacts of every decision we make are ultimately really important and potentially, I would say, a little undervalued so far. And if you look at any, say, a paint choice, that decision has a negative or positive impact, whether or not we want to plug into it or understand it. And that impact lies across many scales as well. Now, we know that also materiality, as we call it in architecture, or materials, is what a person experiences. And there's an emotional connection to these materials. And early on in design stages, it becomes really, really important to capture that. And a lot of materials and the way a building is rendered or captured really connects and resonates with the end users. And that emotional connection actually then ultimately depends and actually drives a lot of impacts later down the stage. So if you've sold a titanium building to someone up front, there's very little that you can do in terms of modeling it later to change that impact. So it's really important that designers and non-technical teams understand the impact of that emotional selling that we do in early stages. But of course, we know that sustainability isn't just about which material, it's about a whole host of other things, like where the building is or the site is, who is building it, what their needs are, when is it being built, or when are we looking at impact, is it new build, is it refurbishment, what are the desired impacts and why are those outputs desired, what are the opportunities, around strategies, orientation, shape, volume, which materials and products comes into the mix, and whether or not impact then sits on the outside of that. And all of this together creates an impact. But if we look at just which materials and whether there's an impact, if there's a way to understand and simplify that, then that actually then feeds into everything else through the decision-making of a project. So it starts to influence, what are you choosing? Where is the site? Who it is, what the budget is, is it a refurbishment? Is it something that's simple to build? Are we fundamentally choosing materials for it, or are we picking materials that suit the materials that already exist? And what are the design outputs, for the end user, and what are the opportunities and strategies? Again, materials and products impacts and starts to affect and influence, and in a way inform everything else. And so we believe that this is a very important piece, that if we could somehow come up with a way to simplify it, it would make it easier for everyone. But we know that finding sustainable materials and products for projects is really, really hard for teams because architectural education or most education doesn't really focus on material science. It's very, very complex science. There's many parameters, and traditionally that's that's always been on the outside of the decision-making process. And, we've often relied on manufacturers to give us that information. But now we have a situation where, we're questioning whether we can rely on that information, whether there's greenwashing or not. So it's very, very challenging. And it's a lot of effort with very little clarity. We also know that different parts of a building need different types of products. So there's no perfect product. There's no gold star product that we can just take and apply. We need thoughtful consideration of where the product is going, what its performance criteria are, and everything that we cared about, for example, durability and fire rating and thermal performance. Those criteria haven't gone away. We just have new parameters to think about, for example, embodied carbon, or now we're even starting to think about embodied ecological impacts of products. So this isn't a simple exercise necessarily for teams. And again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of eco labels, there's a lot of greenwashing, and eco labels aren't necessarily greenwashing, but people don't understand what an eco label really is. What is an EPD and what does an EPD actually tell us? What do the numbers in an EPD tell us? Having a label is one thing, but understanding it is another. So, of course, to be able to make meaningful decisions, teams really need to understand material property impacts very, very quickly. They need to understand management and manufacturing process impacts. And also alongside that, we need to understand performance criteria like fire rating, breathability, acoustic impact. Now, these are very, very important criteria that have traditionally been in the hands of, say, a very technical person in the team. But what we've done with Firstplanit is we kind of went into deep research and we said, well, how do we make these complex impact information simple, especially when people don't have sustainability experts? So we modeled, can we model the impact comprehensively at the level of a product? So if you think about a product as a system, can we pre-package that in some way, or can we deliver that effectively in a way that then can be accrued up? So micro decisions can be added up towards bigger impact. So a bottom-up approach, really. And so what we came up with, and I'll explain how we came to this, is what fundamentally runs Firstplanit is this system of ungreenwashing, standardizing, and simplifying complex information. So we created almost like a food nutrition label, that displays a product's properties graphically and numerically. We created a sort of a traffic light system. And this system looks at bringing together environmental parameters with social parameters, with health impact parameters and monetary parameters in a quick and easy way for users to then sift through and filter, depending on what their motivations might be, what their goals might be, what their targets might be. And even if they're leading with, say, we want low embodied carbon products, they still have an understanding of what other properties does this product have. And sometimes people don't realize, for example, that a locally made product can be very polluting or can be extremely toxic. Other times people don't understand whether durability works together with low embodied carbon indicators, or whether it works in opposition. So what this does is it really captures the synergies and tensions that exist when anybody manufactures a product. Now, no product's perfect. And what this system captures is where the product leads. For example, is it a healthier product than the other product? Or does it have a better environmental impact than another product? Or is it actually good value for money long term? And there's direct and indirect sort of consequences of having or not having these parameters. Now, this may seem very simple in the front end, and the big question is, how did we get there? And we went through a really deep study, and I'll share that with you in a sec. So our research, when we started working on Firstplanit, we thought, well, this is very, very complex, but let's unpack it. Let's unpack it from the perspective of the end user. So we captured what end user motivations might be. So some people, as I mentioned earlier, are all for locally made products. Some people are all into, lower embodied carbon products. Some people were looking at plastic free. Some people were motivated by low embodied energy. Some people were motivated by performance indicators, U values, etc. But when you look at existing certifications and bigger targets, they were capturing some of this, but we weren't exactly sure how they were capturing it and how that would map up. So we looked at a load of existing certifications, existing standards, and we mapped some of the parameters and indicators against the core areas of interest to us, the core areas of influence. And we were also interested in understanding the boundaries. So what would be the boundaries? How would we define environmental impact, social impact, health impact, and economic or monetary impact at the level of a product, and what influences that might have? So we did a big mapping exercise around that. We then looked at the life cycle stages of a product, because there's a whole study around LCA. So we looked at LCA as a whole, and then we looked at, well, what are the areas of influence? Where does decision-making really matter? And where does manufacturing process really matter? So there are things that we do during designing process, for example, whether or not we're designing something for disassembly and whether it has the potential for that really influences outcomes, to whether or not a product has been made in a certain way, how much energy has gone into it, and what sort of raw materials it has. So there were various aspects that were distributed alongside life cycle. So we unpacked that as well. And we then again went into a lot of literature review that started to look at these core areas of influence, for example, environment, social, health, and monetary indicators, and what sort of variables sit within these big parameters. So for example, within environment, it might be CO2 emissions, it might be air pollution, water pollution, and various parameters that also link, for example, social indicators. And we were interested in understanding how the manufacturing or the use of a material or the disposal of a material influenced that particular big area of impact. And then what characteristics of a material might start to influence those variables. So we did a really big study on that. And when we got a better understanding of that, we started to look at the weightages and the driving factors of different parameters. So we, again, went through a whole load of methodologies to understand, well, which parameter might be more important, how that might influence a certain variable, how important the weightage of that variable might be within that bigger area of impact. So for example, within environment, how influential might CO2 emissions be, and how influential might embodied carbon parameters within a product's LCA be towards that parameter. So we did a big mapping exercise of that. And we then came up with a system and a rating system that was able to capture these synergies and tensions quite effectively. We then remapped all of that back into our existing targets and goals and certification. So if you imagine, we went through the full cycle of unpacking, repacking, and then essentially, sort of backpacking all the way back to these targets, because what we really wanted to do was capture those tiny motivations and decisions, and then help, non-technically trained people to quickly identify their choices or their motivations and how that might impact some of the big targets and parameters. We, of course, then defined each of these indicators. So, for example, for every product, we have, at least every material, we have 18 indicators. We said it's not okay to just say low embodied carbon. How do we define low embodied carbon? At what stage and at what value can we say from a specifier's perspective, again, very much from a specifier's perspective of what would be considered low embodied carbon product? Now, if you imagine, in the manufacturing world, manufacturers are really interested in competing within categories. So most of the concrete manufacturers will compete with other concrete manufacturers. Most of the wood flooring companies would compete with other wood flooring companies. But as a specifier, we're always looking at cross-category comparisons. And when we have to look at cross-category comparisons, standardization of information is really important, and standardization of definitions is really important. So we went into this exercise of identifying how can we define certain things in a little bit more detail so that we're able to effectively cross-compare, on a like-for-like basis. So we're not sort of, a concrete manufacturer saying we're really low toxic, and that low toxicity is only in the area of, say, what concretes do. We wanted that to be comparable to, say, a bamboo structure or a bamboo structural system in a way. So, or even, a vinyl flooring, like we should be able to cross compare that. So that's kind of what we did. We've defined everything and we created a criteria or a cutoff for each of those definitions. And we created a system for saying, well, there's a minimum threshold for calling yourself durable. And if you're better than that minimum threshold, then you incrementally can get better credit and in a way, more weightage or more scoring in that area. And that also was very easy for users to identify with this traffic light system. We also, of course, looked at where all this data sits. So if you imagine, if you're trying to be comprehensive, you have to be extremely interested in identifying what data sources are, where they are, how are we going to get information on all these parameters, and when there isn't data, what do we do? But what we effectively said is that knowing that there is no data is also a data point, and we're capturing that. But we were also looking at where do manufacturers put this information? Where is this information in Ether? And so we mapped all of this. And then, of course, we wanted to visualize all of this through analytical dashboards. So we went through an exercise of analyzing that data and synthesizing when say a specifier, compiles say 5-6 different products, so a paint and a floor and say a window. How do we give them meaningful data on the analytics of how much embodied carbon there might be, or what sort of toxicity is there in their entire product inventory, not just at one product at a time? And then we mapped it back to say LEED, BREEAM, WELL. So if somebody is going for a BREEAM or a LEED or a WELL accreditation, can we create a single tick box for them to be able to find the product that meets those criteria? Because we're working on more than 250 to 300 data points for every product. So we mapped all of that. So we knew that, okay, this type of data analysis would be really useful. But we also know that to meet green targets, it's not just about data or data synthesis or data presentation. It's teams need to be able to basically answer 3 key questions. Of course, what is the impact of this product comprehensively? And that's something that we touched upon just now. But they also need to understand whether the product suits their specific building or their site, and their end user motivation. So a product may be amazing, but it might not be good for them, for that specific climate condition or for that historic building. So contextualized intelligence is also really, really important. And then the third thing that teams really needed was a buy-in from the whole team. So decisions are not made in isolation, especially in our construction industry, and a project changes many hands. So it was really important that we created a multiplayer co-creating environment. So, good intentions early on are delivered when the product is being built and also when it's being maintained. So everybody can understand what is being selected and why it's being selected and why it's important. So what we've done with Firstplanit is then built this ecosystem around this research. And the ecosystem comprises of 3 key components. The first is, of course, a building materials and products library, where information on products is really sort of easy to understand for simplicity and speed effectively. People making decisions very, very quickly, non-technical people making decisions very quickly. But also teams can plan entire projects with contextualized intelligence. And so this is something that we're still working on, but we have a beta of this already. And we're really interested in starting to recommend which types of products would work in which types of areas for which types of buildings, because effectively, once we understand material properties really well, that mapping should be possible. And that in a way would further reduce sort of the information overload for non-technical users. And that's our ultimate goal. And we also deliver these quick impact reports for the whole team, so people can have an eye on what they're selecting. and very easy to use steps, 3-4 steps, and you're there at reports. And these reports can be shared at any stage. And these reports go way beyond embodied carbon. They cover things like thermal performance and map it against embodied carbon. They look at comparison of embodied energy and embodied carbon, look at circularity in a deep way. What percentage of products in real weight, in real kgs, are we diverting from landfill? And all this information is very motivating for teams because they see that their one better decision has an impact. And so we're really interested in that positive reinforcement of one better choice at a time. So this is kind of our manifesto, or sort of like our what we're doing, and what we really want to achieve is to show decision makers immediate benefits of a single sustainable material and product choice. That's really important, that it's not an all or nothing mentality that people have to embody, because I think that comes in the way of sustainability. And we want to capture and drive sustainability through 4 major end user impact metrics, which is health, monetary, social, and environment, because different people are motivated by different things, different times in their life, and different types of projects. They're motivated in different things. And it's not a one size fits all, but ultimately it is these broad categories that we are really interested in. Also, what we want to do is trigger immediate action. And we don't necessarily want to show generic materials like concrete or wood. People don't buy general materials. They ultimately buy specific materials. They buy from specific manufacturers, their brands. And so what we've also noticed is that the impact varies so heavily between 2 companies, which say create cement or concrete. How the manufacturer goes about it has a massive impact. So we're really interested in connecting people to those specifics, and also to products that are available in their regions and connecting them to the suppliers. So it might be amazing to find a product that's coming up in Japan, but if you can't get it in your local area, that's disappointing, once you've sold it to a client or sort of created a whole concept around it. So we're interested in creating trust, equity, and transparency. Everything that we've done in Firstplanit is standardized, and users can see why we've done it. All the definitions are clear. It's like-for-like comparisons, and when there is, it's almost like a semi-open source system where information can be inputted and we check for evidence and then we report it. So there's a whole system behind it, and we personalize recommendations by capturing the context of decisions. And so this is the recommender piece. And we help people achieve and celebrate what is possible on their project, and not pit them against star ratings or shame them for not having done enough. And so it's really important to consider that somebody working on a small project, a retrofit project, or even a kitchen repair or renovation, is not going to have the same ambitions as somebody working on a skyscraper, but they're able to make 1 or 2 better decisions, and they should be able to celebrate those decisions, because that will motivate them to do more and go beyond selecting materials. They might even model the whole building up. We also want to connect people and teams with experts when they need or want help, because it's not just about picking materials. Ultimately, it's also about modeling up a building and bespoke solutions, and that is really important in buildings. We also help manufacturers and suppliers improve their product information. So by creating this degree of clarity and synthesis and benchmarking, we're also helping manufacturers understand, that you can't make a claim and not substantiate it with data. Where you have substantiated with data, make sure that it's clear. Potentially, if you're not doing well against your competitors, you might want to think about, applying for certain, accreditations, or getting some standards or checks in place, maybe doing some R&D. So that kind of really helps them as well. So we have packaged all of, we kind of went about creating the system, and then we evaluated about 2,000 products in the market, and we said we'll publish that in a library. And so this library is free for everyone to access, and teams can go in and plan and compare and understand the products that we have already listed. And if a product is not there, of course, not all products will be there. There's an easy way to add a product. So people can create their own libraries, and you can either add the information yourself, or you can add a manufacturer to add the information. It's free for them too. And what we do in the back end is double check that there is real evidence behind each data points, and then either accept or reject that claim. And that gets published in real time. So if you imagine, it's like a library that's real time, it's live all the time. If a manufacturer has come up with, say, a new certifications that they've acquired, they can then publish that here, send it to us, and it gets, all the information is live for users to use immediately. So let me show you what this looks like in action, and hopefully this will work. It's a small video. Just give me a sec. If it doesn't work, I will explain this. Nope. The video is not working. I do apologize, but if you're interested, I will cover this in the webinar that I will be putting together to show you the tool. But effectively, what you can do is you can go in and through the filtering system on the side, which I will show you here, through the filtering system on the side, you can identify, say, you can choose, I want to find, say, a paint that is locally made, low embodied carbon and low toxic. And what the tool will do is show you, shortlist those materials and show you what those products are. You can go deeper into that product and actually understand the analytics behind it. Now, I do apologize for this. I will try at the end if I can make this work, because sometimes it doesn't work with one PDF document, but it does with the other. So I will do that. You can also create a whole project. So you can actually enter, for example, a postcode, you can put a photograph, you can enter a few parameters on what the product is, and you can then go in and share this project with your whole team. And you effectively, let me try and see if this works. Nope, not working. I will show you the tool itself, don't worry. Let's skip this part. And you can also determine costs as well. So ultimately, what we're doing with Firstplanit, and the model is that we bring people together and different, people together, team, different sort of capabilities together as well. So you'll have a conceptual designer with a contractor, with, say, a building owner even, and they can come together and make these product choices, material choices very quickly because the information and impact is prepackaged. They can then ultimately accrue all of that up and then replug it back into, all sorts of building rating systems and targets at the level of an organization. So if you imagine what Firstplanit lets people do is if they're interested in just identifying one product that is green, they can go and pick that and they get a report and they get analysis for that. If they're interested in one project, so it could be a refurbishment project, could be, a new build project, doesn't matter. They can come together and get reports and analytics on that one project, and they can co-create. But also at the level of an organization. So for example, government bodies or big businesses that have multiple assets and they're managing all these assets and they don't know, what is being chosen for those assets and how those choices are impacting the planet or society or health, or ultimately their bottom line. They can use Firstplanit to capture that little and often work and monitor that over a period of time, and then make decisions on changing out that one paint. For example, it could be a paint that they've used over, 100,000 square meters of a building. And that one choice then ultimately has a massive impact on the output. We're also working with other tools to integrate into other tools, to work with other tools, to get the data out, get the data back in, and map it more effectively as well, capturing some of the more operational aspects. We're already looking into not just building materials as in, wood, concrete, steel. We're also looking at systems, for example, solar panels and appliances and ground source heat pumps, and comparing those for impacts, for embodied impacts and operational impacts. And we're able to deliver those reports as well. But we want to be able to work together with whole building modeling systems as well. When needed, the data could be transferred over and then mapped against overall total outputs. But it's not necessary for people to do that. But if they do want to do that, that is something that we're looking into. So that's it from me. But I will take more questions, and I'm happy to show you the tool or check what's wrong with my slide and then go back and show you the tool in a little bit more detail.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ankita. I would like to invite a virtual round of applause. It was such a comprehensive presentation. It's such a complex tool, dealing with such complex parameters. So yeah, thank you. You've done a brilliant job describing it. So we have a few questions, a couple of questions in the Q&A, but can I please invite our audience to continue posting any questions they might have? So Pepe is asking, so thanks for a great presentation so far. I was wondering, what are the data sets behind those indicators and how were the scorings decided or based on?
Yes, so very interesting. So there's a whole host of things. So we did a really big literature review. So it's not one data set, because there isn't one data set. There are data sets for embodied carbon, for example. So you can think ICE data set, or they could be, BRE's data set. There's many data sets around carbon. But what we looked at, we're not looking at data sets, we're creating a data set, if you will. And the data set is, again, as I said, we mapped where the data sits. And we're also, essentially in the beginning, we manually collated it. And now we're writing scripts to find that information from open source information and collate that, and then invite manufacturers to come to the table. Also manufacturers themselves, because we've created a system effectively, they're able to input the information into the system. So if you wish that we are creating a type of data set that doesn't exist. And the way that we worked through, our rating system, again, we use a lot of, industry standard methodologies. We use ISM, we are looking at BWM methodologies, but effectively we, again, went through a system of peer reviews. We had loads of people peer review the outputs. We compared the outputs against existing tools on how our different rating systems are working with existing tools. And what we found was that a lot of tools were working on environment. So we were able to compare our outputs on environment against a lot of tools. Social impact was quite hard because we have some paper-based tools that do that, but effectively they're not digitized yet. So we were looking at, okay, what are these tools? What are the criteria that they're capturing, and what are we capturing, and how do they weight it? And that's, again, up to question. But again, we're happy to share that more in detail, but that's been our core research.
Great. So the next question is from Oledayu. How is your software different from those we use in energy modeling that gives us the U value, sound transmittance, etc., when we select a particular material in their database?
Yes, so what a lot of modeling tools are doing, they have performance indicators, but they don't have health indicators, or they don't have other embodied indicators. And they might not capture, for example, the social indicators. So they don't really capture what the manufacturers, policies around pay parity are, or anti-slavery policy. So they're not able to capture those parameters, or they haven't captured those parameters yet, because those data sets, again, don't exist. So we are actually looking effectively at, because we're combining different parameters together, we're able to model that up very quickly here, instead of, again, what they're doing in building modeling tools is taking such data sets and then applying it to objects or to, different models that you make, smaller models within the bigger model. You can apply that, and then you see, you basically effectively get the area, which is what we're doing here in a different way. I think the video should work now. There was one piece that wasn't working. I can try that again if people are interested. But let me see if oh, maybe not. I will try and fix that in a sec. But yes, any other questions?
We have another question from Pepe. So you mentioned that the initial part of the process is bringing all the stakeholders involved together. How does the tool actually achieve this? And based on the tool advising a certain brand, how do they ensure this is no bias? So very good question.
Yes, no, absolutely. So the whole tool, the tool itself, so the project feature of the tool essentially set up for co-creation. So you can invite as many stakeholders as required onto the project, and you can co-create with them. So you can invite a cost consultant, you can invite your client into the mix. And I will show you the tool in a sec, because you'll understand what I'm saying when you see it. But that co-creation effectively allows non-technical people to engage with very technical information very, very quickly. And if they want to, and then it's displayed in a way that's easy for them to understand. So what that does is that a technical team member could be, sort of overseeing, or sustainability leader could be overseeing the process, but doesn't have to go and fix all the problems that everybody else has created. So that was the first part of the question. There was a second part of the question as well. Anna, can you repeat that?
Yes, so the second part was based on the tool advising a certain brand, how do they ensure this is not biased?
Yes, so we are, because our system is so, like what we built is so systematic and so standardized, that the data input is it's very clear, right? So for example, if somebody has a certain amount of, say, they have an EPD, right? So some products have an EPD, some products don't have an EPD, they have an EPD, and they have certain data values that they have displayed in the EPD. We translate that information in a standardized format. So users can quickly see where that product is benchmarked against all the other products in the same category. And so you can compare different products, and you don't have to choose one product. And effectively what you can see is where the product leads and where the product potentially isn't as good as another product in the market. So that degree of transparency is at everyone's fingertips, and we're not necessarily pushing people towards one product. We are saying choose products and choose attributes and indicators that are important to you, and we will show you which products have that particular indicator. And again, because it's a systematic approach and because it's so rigorous, it's one of the most rigorous systems that at least we know of. There might be others out there, but because it's rigorous and it takes a lot of time for manufacturers also to understand that, we also have, for example, PDF documents, supporting claims around, well, we are FSC rated, or we are, we have certain certifications, and we refer back to those certifications as well in a meaningful way. But we translate what having that certificate means for the user. It's one thing saying FSC. If you ask people, what does FSC mean? What are you achieving with FSC? Some people might know, okay, there is some responsibility around forests. They don't know actually what that means, or what does C2C, cradle to cradle mean? And so because we're unpacking it, it becomes easy for end users to understand, okay, this is a low toxic product, or, this is a rapidly degradable product, or, this is a rapidly renewable product, so they understand those terms in a way that makes sense to them, and they can act on that really quickly. And then it cross connects to everything else.
Thanks, that's very clear. Another question by Oledayo. How can your software integrate African local materials?
So everybody can create their own library. So what we're doing now at the moment, and the tool is still in beta, and I will actually try and show you the tool, if I may. I'll just log in, I'll stop sharing, and I'll...
Yeah, there is a suggestion that if you leave the PDF presentation form, you might be able to play the video in a video enabled app.
Yeah, so this, let me just close and reopen, and it might do that. So what we've done at the moment is we started with like a beta for the UK, and if you see on the label, it says, Firstplanit UK, and I'll show that to you in a sec. Every region can create their own library because it's a similar system. And what you will see is that for a region, there might be different things that are important, or for different type of projects. For example, you might be more interested in natural materials. If you look at low embodied carbon and low embodied energy, that's a good proxy to identify natural materials. So we've gone for things that have quantitative basis as well. So it's qualitative and quantitative at the same time. You can also find materials that are potentially low toxic for certain regions, but you can use that system and apply it in any region. And now we're starting to pilot outside the UK. We're doing a few projects in the US, projects in India. So we're trying to see, well, is the distribution of indicators good enough, or do we need to add a few? And the system is flexible enough. So for example, we know that we may need to add some, for example, water usage indicators for certain regions, which we haven't at the moment, because for the UK that wasn't essential. And also for materials, the data was really, really terrible, even within EPDs. around water. So we kind of left it out, but we know that, what we've done is that we've created a flexible system that means at any point, if we want to change a cutoff or an indicator, we're able to do that. And we're able to do that along with the industry. But that still means that every product, every system can be compared like for like. It resets the channels. And so the user can then still, use, for example, low embodied carbon, but the threshold of low embodied carbon may have been changed because there's new information in our industry. So let me try and see if I can reshare that. But Anna, do ask me any more questions, because I do want to give everyone a glimpse of the tool.
Yeah, there's one more question, if you can take it, by Ariana. Is this a commercial platform or is it open source?
So it is a commercial. We want to commercialize it because we want to make the business sustainable. It didn't start off as that, but we're definitely interested in commercializing it. And because it's not funded by anyone, it is a grassroots, as I said, it's not institutional funding. It doesn't have private funding. It is a group of us that have built it. We're really keen to make it a commercial success as well. Because ultimately, we know that if something that you build is not a commercial success, people don't use it. And I think you're on mute.
Yeah. So yeah, would you like to try to share it again, or?
Yes, I'm just in the process of trying to share it again. Okay. We should have tested the videos.
Yes.
But never mind, I could definitely. Okay, so let me see. Okay, it's working. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
It's
so
not
if
full
somebody
screen,
wants to find, say, a locally made low embodied carbon, a low toxic paint, like I said, you can actually go and find it. So you can see, it's super easy. And this is kind of the food nutrition label. You can see when you click on the eye icon, you'll see the definitions, the criteria, if you wanted to understand what moisture balancing means, how we've defined it, and whether or not a product has a property, you can see that very clearly. You can compare different products again, as I said, like for like. You can see where it scores higher. We've also now got LEED, BREEAM, and WELL standards that you can compare. And let me show you very quickly. If you wanted to create a project, again, it's about finding that one material or product that's potentially meets your criteria or might somehow be beneficial to the environment or society, but creating a whole project. So you can create a project, you can enter, say, a name of the project. You can add a photograph. And you can enter a postcode and location. Now this is richer, so it could be international location as well. When we made this, it was for UK. And select the type of work that's happening. So is it renovation, retrofit? Is it a new build? What types of spaces are being built? You can create spaces. There could be assemblies or rooms as well. And you kind of select together what the top priority for the project might be, whether it's impact on community, on cost, on health. And that kind of helps make decisions later down the line. But teams can come and change that. So once this is saved, this can be shared. So there's a share button. You can give people edit rights or view rights. And going into the project book, what we do is, first thing we do is connect people to the environmental risks. And this is a beta, again, for the UK. We're interested in working on this for other regions. But you can kind of start to see the overlap between air pollution, noise, and flood risk. Even if you're making a small product decision, we want people to understand the big influences on that particular property. We're also working through the system where you can see what opportunities might there be, what types of strategies you might use for that particular project in that area. And this is sort of the big algorithm that we're writing at the moment. But ultimately, you can select strategies and you can try and find products that meet that particular strategy. So strategy might be low embodied carbon products, or it could be, I want products that are suitable for design for disassembly, for example. So you can go and find those particular products through those motivations. And you can manage the inventory as well. So you can start to save these products almost, there could be a designer saving these products in a scrapbook. You literally click a button and it goes and saves these. And there's spaces that you can create as in kitchen, loft, bathroom, or as I said, exterior wall, interior wall. And in the decide function, teams can enter quantities, they can enter costs. Again, there could be a cost consultant entering that while a designer is working on some of the front end with the clients, almost like a shopping experience, very easy. And you can contact suppliers. You can also chat with suppliers directly from the site. So you can ask questions like, well, how much would it cost for, 100 square meters of this? What is the lead time? Or tell me more about this detail. And ultimately, when you move products to a final list, and the final list isn't like the purchase list, it's almost like a holding place. And from there, you can model all sorts of impacts. And they're very, very detailed reports and analytics. And I can show you a glimpse of that in our webinar, but also today if we have the chance. So this is kind of where we're at with the tool. But what we're really, let me just go into it and you can see it live, if internet permits, and I can show you an example of the analytics dashboards that we have. The internet might be a little bit slow because we're sharing this here. Let me just log in. So you can go in and create an account and you can start exploring. I'm going to use my colleagues' login details, but I will share with you. So for example, on the dashboard, there's multiple projects that we've been working on with people, trialing projects. So let me just show you one project that we worked on. And you can see there's a whole journey in the scrapbook. There's several products that were saved, so you can see, well, what have we selected for this space? What's in the entrance? You can see, well, these two products. You can go into decide function. And you will also see, a whole load of products coming up. You can enter costs. You can also change the units in which you want to add quantities. Effectively very useful. But in the beginning, if you don't have quantities, you can leave it as 1 meter square. And these are the analytics on the back end, as you can see. So this will come up in a sec. Just give it a moment. So you can see you're working on a very non-technical interface on the front end, but on the back end, you get a lot of data on the product. And you can choose, what types of information you might be interested in. You might be interested in carbon. You might be interested in the distribution, what properties, what percentage is locally made, what percentage has, for example, anti-slavery policy. You can also look at which products meet LEED, BREEAM, and WELL criteria. So you can see, well, these are the products that would meet WELL criteria for this particular attribute. You can see that very quickly. You can download this. You can see circularity graphs flow through in real kilograms and on what percentage is recycled content. You can also see where the products are sourced from. You can see how these products align with UN SDG goals. But also if you go into the details, here you can study carbon in much more detail. You can look at the project level or at the material level. And what we're doing is we're benchmarking every product against a base case that's really popular in the industry. And we've created a list of products. So people don't have to model up a base case if they don't want to, but they can always model up a base case too. Again, saving people that time and effort. So you can see, okay, this product is this much better than that per meter square, but also you can see it when you enter quantities, how that changes. Again, tree graphs, very easy to access. Again, a few more I will show you that are interesting is we map embodied energy and embodied carbon, again, per meter square, and also and quantities are entered just so people can understand that, low embodied carbon doesn't mean low embodied energy. There's still a lot of investment in energy and how that works through. And the size of the circle is the amount of the product. So you can quickly see, well, are we investing in the right thing? You can see total circularity in graphs as well. You can see exact kilograms again. We also have reclaimed products in the mix alongside new products because we are not dependent on EPDs. We're backfilling some of the carbon data from standard data sets that we can, but capturing other properties that these materials have that can't be captured by an EPD. So reclaimed materials as well in the mix. Again, if you look at social reports, you can see a distribution there. And within health reports, you can start to look at, for example, thermal insulation, how are they doing? How do they work against each other, with each other? Whether flooring materials, especially for carpet, that is becoming a really important thing. They're high embodied carbon products, but a lot of people can't not use them because of their properties. But one last thing I'll show you at the level of product that wasn't clear in my slide, and I'm going to end with that, is we've got, of course, the view of the product graphically. Let me just show you this one material. So you can see it graphically, but also we have all the data behind the scenes, and you can see how this product benchmarks against all the other pains that we have in the system. So you're constantly aware of what's going on, and you can see, there's a whole lot of other things that you can read about the material.
And I have to say the graphical representations are really high quality. So mindful of the time, I think we have to end within the next minute. So thank you again so much, Ankita. You've presented a lot of information. I think hopefully our audience will go away and spend some time experimenting with the tool online. But yeah, it's such a fantastic resource. So again, many congratulations for putting it all together. And just to mention that our Net Zero Symposium will be on the 31st of March, and this will be soon available to register for on Eventbrite. So please do follow us on Twitter to find out more about our activities and future events. So once more, I'd like to invite another round of virtual applause for Ankita and the fantastic job she's done today. It was a brilliant talk, and I think we should continue this conversation as well offline, and hopefully you're fine with people contacting you as well.
Yes, please.
If you have any questions. Yeah.
And as I said, we're offering some free spaces on an in-depth study on how the project tool works and all the analytics behind it. I gave you a glimpse of it, and thank you for listening, and thank you for having me. And all feedback is really welcome.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ankita, and thank you all for joining.